NFC East, reigning Super Bowl champ Philadelphia Eagles. A pretty solid offseason considering everything they could have lost in free agency and everything that they had to lose. They did make some moves on the defensive side of the ball. And look, they've still got Jalen Hurts. They've still got A.J. Brown, who we just got done talking about. They've still got Saquon Barkley. Minus 150 to win the division. That number makes sense in this division. Plus 325 to win the NFC. Favorites to repeat as Super Bowl champions at plus 650. The one spot I look at with the Eagles, and this isn't a depth chart spot, this is a schedule spot, is the beginning of the schedule. They open up division rivalry game. They kick the season off at home against the Cowboys. Then they got to go to Kansas City, Super Bowl rematch. They got to host the Rams. They got to go to Tampa Bay. They got to host the Broncos in that revamped Denver defense before they finally get a little bit of a breather and going to Jersey to play the Giants in week 6. But 2 Giants games sandwiched around a trip to Minnesota. The first half of the schedule, they come off their bye to visit Green Bay as well and then host Detroit. The first half of their schedule is not easy. And look, the NFC East schedule is pretty stacked for all of these teams, but they got to come out of the chute hot, the Eagles.
Yeah, and that's tough to do if they're nursing a Super Bowl hangover at all. Like, this team better come ready to play week 1 because, as you just laid out, they have the, in terms of schedule difficulty, the increase from last year, their schedule difficulty has increased more than any other team in the league. And that's expected. You have a first place schedule, obviously winning the division. And just how the schedules shake out. You play the NFC North and the AFC West this year. Like, that is significantly different than playing the NFC South and AFC North last year. Like, it's just going to be a entirely different season, especially you lose a ton defensively, like that secondary. I know you have some of those younger players, Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, who were great, but you lose some of that veteran depth. And then you just worry about like the wear and tear. Saquon was, 436 carries in 20 games last year. Yeah, I'm not worried like Saquon's going to take a massive step back, but you play as many games as you did last year, winning the Super Bowl, playing that late into the season, and then you come back and have a even more difficult schedule with an even bigger target on your back. I'm going under on their win total, 11.5. I'm going under for the Eagles this year. Taking them to win the division, like, I just don't know if the Commanders are there quite yet, and I don't trust the Cowboys or the Giants. So the stat that everyone's going to throw around this season, because it is kind of crazy, is there hasn't been a repeat division winner in 20 plus years. I think that changes this year.
That's a really good point, and the price isn't there at minus 150 to bet it, but this could be a year where, because of the rising tide with the Commanders and the Cowboys, as much as we make fun of them, always remain competitive. This could be a year where the Eagles win the NFC East with 10 wins. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility at all, given the way the schedule stacks up for everybody in that division. You could walk away feeling pretty good about the Eagles and Commanders and the years that they have in the regular season anyway, and they could both be in the playoffs, but at 10 and 9 wins respectively, because they've got to play, like you said, the NFC North and the AFC West. And there's just not a lot of cupcakes when you look at those two divisions. I mean, 7 out of those 8 games are going to be, at least 6, but probably 7 are going to be difficult for different reasons. So that's a great, really actually a great look. I like under 11.5 while still remaining positive about the Eagles. And you point out the secondary losses, but I think they've done such a great job of reloading on the fly, which is so difficult to do while you're winning the way they have the last few years, that, like you said, Ringo and Brown and Blankenship and Mitchell and DeJean, that's a very young secondary, but one that replaces a bunch of names that you recognize, and you go, oh, well, I got rid of a whole bunch of guys from the secondary walk, guys who have rings, but then you go, but wait, all these young guys have rings as well. And so they're ready to go. They've done a great job, Howie Roseman, of rebuilding that defense, especially the secondary that a couple of years ago was awful, on the fly. So credit to him. I think you could believe the Eagles are going to be good and win their division while still betting the under just because of the schedule. As for the Commanders, we talked about the addition of Von Miller earlier as it happened last night. They also had Deebo Samuel. I don't know what that means at this point in Deebo's career. Terry McLaurin is still arguing with them over contract numbers. They did get Laramie Tunsil to help the offensive line, and they fortified the front seven by adding Javon Kinlaw as well. A lot of people aren't impressed with the additions of Miller and Kinlaw, but it does help them in the front seven where they're still working to get back to where they need to be after missing on so many draft choices, high draft choices on the defensive line. Plus 225 to win the division, Kate. 9-1 to win the NFC Championship, 22-1 to win the Super Bowl. Here's, again, we look at the schedule with these NFC East teams. Here's my worry. The last 5 weeks of the year. At Minnesota, then a division game at the Giants, then Philly, Dallas, at Philly. I mean, you stack 4 divisional games up in the final 4 weeks of the season, all of them outside in the elements. This is where if Washington doesn't take advantage of opportunities early in the year, they could be in a tough spot.
Yeah, I just talked about the Eagles having the biggest jump in difficulty. The Commanders have the second biggest jump in difficulty in their schedule this year, and it makes sense. Sophomore slump for Jaden Daniels. I don't see it happening because of how good he was last year, and just being able to come into an organization, a franchise that had been so god-awful for so long, and to be able to do that. But I guess I'm interested in your perspective on that, because why do we talk about sophomore slumps for some quarterbacks and not others? And maybe we'll talk Bo Nix in his second season coming up when we do AFC West, but like, who was the one? I forget which one last year. We everyone thought for sure they would regress. I don't know, bad example, but like, do you think Jane Daniels is going to take a step back this year? Because I think that's where this hinges on. If you go over their win total, it's because you believe in Daniels. If you go under, it's because you think maybe he regresses a little bit.
I hate to sort of hedge our opinions on all this like we did with Philly, but I do think there's a way you can see Jaden Daniels play well, really well even, but still not quite, take off like the rocket he did in his first year. I would use CJ Stroud as a comparison, right? CJ Stroud, great rookie year, second year, And you could talk about all the other pieces around him that maybe didn't fulfill their potential, injuries at the receiver position, all that. I think Jaden Daniels could have a good year. The Commanders could have a good year. And again, we could still be talking about a 9-8 team that doesn't win the division, but is obviously in the playoffs and able to win a game or two in the playoffs. And we're talking a sophomore slump. I think this is the problem with us as sports fans and those of us that watch the games all the time. Sometimes we say sophomore slump and people just in their heads flip the switch to, oh, that guy's going to suck this year. No. That's not what we're saying. Sophomore slump, I think, could be a thing. And it doesn't even mean a regression in statistics or even performance. It just means you saw what you saw last year. So your expectations, again, like I talked about with Puka Nacua earlier, go through the roof. Oh my God, what can this guy do? And instead, he just kind of stays steady or plateaus a little bit because the league punches back, to use an analogy, because they've seen everything that he can do, or most of the things that he can do. I wouldn't call it a sophomore slump, but I think he's going to level off a little bit this year. He's not going to take off like the rocket ship MVP candidate that a lot of people expect him to be. And again, it's why, much like we talked about the Eagles, I think the Commanders could have a good season, but it could still be a 9-win season. They finished second in the division and they're a wild card.
And I mean, that's a great point in just maybe he plateaus a little bit. There's also a lot of tape on him now. Rookie season, exactly. Like all the focus was on Caleb Williams going into the year. I shouldn't say all of it because, Daniels was up there, but there's a lot of tape on him. People have seen him now and he's got a target on his back. Like everyone's going to want to make sure they show their best stuff against him. So yeah, I think that's a great look that they could still be a good team, but win total under. Cowboys, Chris, this is going to be an interesting
of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, or maybe doing nothing over and over again and expecting different results. 8.5 wins. I don't know what to think of the Cowboys anymore. I don't. Like, you got to love CeeDee Lamb. I like Dak Prescott more than most people do, even if he's got the occasional boneheaded interception in his arsenal. I kind of like the addition of Pickens from a talent perspective, obviously, but I'll be curious to see what happens the first time CD gets a dozen targets and 2 touchdown catches in a game and Pickens gets 4 targets and 34 yards. Like, that's going to be an issue. I know he said it won't be, but I'm here to tell you, it will be an issue. And they still don't have a running back. I kind of like Javonte Williams, but Miles Sanders bottomed out in Carolina. They don't have a running back. Still, they don't have a running. I don't know what it's going to take for them to understand that you have to have a running back, especially in this division, but they still don't have one. So, I mean, I think 8.5 is about as dead on for a win total as you can get.
It is also juice minus 140 to the under right now. Like, the vibes are not high in Dallas. Yeah, the receiving game is going to be great, or the receiving core on paper looks great, but the concerns you just raised about Pickens, you know better than anyone, being a Steelers fan, Chris, what goes in with that player. Dak Prescott wins games. Like, he does. He wins a ton of games when he's healthy. And they can put up a bunch of points, but without a run game, we saw how much that hindered their offense last season. It just doesn't open up anything, and they don't have one again this year. So that's my concern. And then you look at their schedule, week 12 through 15, they play the Eagles, Chiefs, Lions, and Vikings. Like, at that point, what do they look like going into that stretch? And can they win any of those games? Really? I think they'll be underdogs in all of them. Are the Vikings at home or on the road? That would be
That's at home. They might not be dogs there, depending on what the Vikings look like by that point.
Probably not.
It's a great point. And they could start 4-5. Like, they open, like we talked about, at Philly, and then they got to go to Chicago in week 3. They host Green Bay the following week. They got to host Washington in week 7, at Denver in week 8. Again, they could be 4-5 going into the bye. Who knows what happens with the Cowboys at the trade deadline? And then before you know it, like you said, that brutal stretch of Philly, Kansas City, at Detroit, Minnesota, even though it's at home, the Chargers, even though it's at home. It's actually, you could argue, a 5-week stretch where they could struggle to win a game. And then we're talking about a 6 or 7 win Cowboy team, maybe, when it's all said and done, which would, solidly get you the under, if nothing else. But that's why it's juiced heavily at minus 8.5. Real quick, the Giants, love Abdul Carter and Jackson Dart both in the first round. Love it. I don't mind Russell Wilson and Jameis keeping the seat warm for Jackson Dart and chucking up some moon balls to Malik Neighbors. I like the Javon Holland signing, but they've got the most difficult schedule in the league. 5.5 wins is just about dead on for them.